Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service. It is Sunday, March 26, 2023. You can always find additional weather information on top of what I provide in this broadcast at weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll take you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii. And if you point and click anywhere on this map, it'll pull up a forecast with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories. This Sunday afternoon, we have severe weather again down here along the lower Mississippi Valley. A couple of severe weather watches, severe thunderstorm and tornado watches in effect across parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. Further to the north and west, winter storm warnings up along areas of the northern Rockies and southern Montana. And then another storm system is going to be coming ashore and affecting especially northern California. A number of winter storm warnings posted for the mountains there, including the Sierra Nevada. Well, here in Alaska, we've had our recent West Coast storm. Things are beginning to wind down there after some high winds and heavier snowfall. We still have areas of locally heavier snow pushing their way eastward that could even be mixed with a little bit of light freezing rain or drizzle at times. That's spreading across the central interior, and that'll continue to do so tonight and into Monday and early Tuesday. Otherwise, pretty quiet weather is expected now across the Gulf Coast area and Panhandle after some gusty winds there in the northern Panhandle, especially late last night, earlier today. And the next West Coast system will arrive late Tuesday night into Wednesday. We're going to watch a low come out of the western Bering Sea, crossing near St. Matthew and approaching the lower Yukon Delta in that time frame. Overall, temperatures are going to average near to below normal here through early April, especially the first few days of April. Even though we've seen temperatures moderate a little bit briefly with this latest system, don't expect things to continue on that trend. No big spring warm-ups on the way anytime soon. Here are some of the peak wind gusts from the storm along the west coast. Cape Lisburne, 100 miles an hour. Second time we've had a storm produce winds that strong. Teller, 71 mile per hour gust. Kotzebue had a gust of 67, but it could have been a bit higher. Just the equipment, there was some data missing there, but otherwise many wind gusts along the west coast there at or above 60 miles an hour. Areas surrounding Norton Sound, generally in the 40 to 50 mile an hour range, including Nome on up through Golovin and then down around to the east side, all the way down to the Scammon Bay there along the lower Yukon Delta. So pretty significant storm system. We're still getting light snow and fog around Selawik with a temperature creeping upward to 33. Look for steady to slowly rising temperatures there as we go through the remainder of today and into tonight. In the interior, Tanana, light snow, 21 degrees. You could see a little bit of light freezing rain or freezing drizzle mix in there tonight. And some of the heavier snow that's going to fall is along the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. But as we go to Bethel, light snow and fog, 36 degrees in areas of the southwest, especially along the southwest coast, may actually turn over to some rain for a time. And we go over to the northern Panhandle, south end of Lynn Canal, Lena Point, clear on the breezy side, 39 degrees, but at least there through the Panhandle. Much of the area along the Gulf Coast will enjoy some quieter weather here to start out the week. Warnings continue. Winter storm warnings in red continue tonight into tomorrow for areas of the southwest here, south side of Norton Sound, east side as well, and going inland toward Galena, Bettles, Ambler. Some of the heaviest snow is going to fall here on the south slopes of the Brooks Range around Ambler, especially as you get on over toward the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys. You could see as much as 1 to 2 feet of snow from the system. Also, some pretty good snows here along the southeast side of the Brooks Range, all the way into Tuesday morning. But eventually the system, the front moving inland, is going to weaken. It has the moisture with it. A little warmer air is coming up from the southwest, so pretty typical. Another thing I want to pass along is that We have a tsunami warning test coming up on Wednesday, March 29th, right around 10:15 in the morning. So what's going to happen is this will be broadcasted on radio and television stations, and it will be announced that it is only a test. So again, a tsunami warning system test. And some communities may even activate their sirens. Don't be alarmed then. So just be aware of the fact that could happen, especially if you're along a coastal area. And NOAA weather radio listeners will also hear the warning alert tone followed by a test message. So keep that in mind. Again, tsunami warning system test across the state of Alaska coming up here Wednesday, March 29th, right around 10:15 in the morning. Looking at satellite image, we have lingering low pressure here heading southeastward now, south of Haida. We have the front that has pushed inland now into the interior. The initial front arcs way up here through the Beaufort Sea, Arctic Ocean, then comes back down through the southwest coast down here along the Aleutian chain, and this feed of moisture continues to work its way northeastward. Hence, some areas, especially when you have the south-facing slopes with that southerly component to the wind and that moisture, that's going to have a tendency to produce some heavier precipitation. And then in the wake of the system, colder air here out over the western half of the Bering, just a scattering of snow showers there. So pretty typical kind of pattern when you have a storm system like this push inland. And the front is just going to slowly work its way eastward and wash out into more or less a trough. I'll show you that here on the surface map. So this afternoon, here is the initial lead front. There's a little shot of warmer air coming up along, and as I mentioned, temperatures, at least as of this Sunday afternoon, on the east side of Kotzebue Sound have been up near and above freezing there south of there. We see a number of temperatures on the east side of Norton Sound and down here in through the southwest into the mid, even a few upper 30s. And so this little bit of sliver of warmer air is going to work its way up on the west and north side of the Alaska Range. So those of you here in through the central interior may pick up a little bit of a light mix of a little bit of freezing rain or freezing drizzle as that happens overnight and into the day on Monday. High pressure center just south of the Gulf and extending northeastward up into northwest Canada, the lower Yukon. Secondary trough on the backside of the system just kind of washes out. These two features by Monday afternoon become more or less troughs as they slowly work their way eastward across the mainland. And then the next weather system behind me just starts to emerge out here along the Japan, coast of Japan and Kamchatka coastline. And then by Tuesday, we expect this low to be crossing the western Bering, heading on toward and maybe just north of St. Matthew Island by Wednesday. But as this system works its way eastward with this frontal system, we're going to get some more wind and precipitation hit areas, especially along and south of the Bering, straight down along the YK deltas. So stay tuned for the potential for some additional advisories and perhaps enough so even a few warnings. Otherwise, temperatures below freezing many areas, the inner channels of the Panhandle, one above at Glen Ellen. It was a chilly night across the Anchorage Bowl, and we expect cool temperatures, but daytime highs should get back up above freezing across much of the region, even flirting with near 40 perhaps in Anchorage areas toward the south. Panhandle may get up to near 50 degrees. Not quite as cold Tuesday morning, and then on Tuesday afternoon, similar temperatures, mid-30s to near 40 across south central, generally in the 40s, maybe an isolated 50 in areas of the southern Panhandle. Across the northern interior, central interior, we see that warmer air temperature steady to slowly rising tonight as that warmer air rides up along the Yukon River Valley and a little downslope perhaps here from the Alaska Range. So temperatures could be in the mid-30s to near 40 degrees, say at places like Fairbanks and back toward McGrath. Even along the Gulf or Arctic coast, temperatures moderate a bit there in the teens to maybe lower 20s. Tuesday morning, coldest readings across the northwest, the western portion of the North Slope and the northwest coast down into the northern Seward Peninsula. Temperatures a bit below zero, and then high temperatures not quite as mild as what they would be on Monday. In here could be back up a little above freezing at Fairbanks. And then across the southwest interior, the warmest air has kind of gone up through the Kuskokwim River Basin with readings near or just above freezing tonight. And on Monday, we expect some temperatures again throughout the southwest interior, mid-30s to near 40 degrees, even maybe 43 there at at McGrath. Lower 40s down along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. A little colder air comes in behind that, 5 above Imanuk, and then areas up through the Kuskokwim Basin, west side Alaska Range in the teens. Still near freezing possible, say at McGrath, but a little cooler than what we saw there before. Now, this is kind of interesting looking what the temperatures are expected to do here as we go into early April. Keep in mind this latest system did pull a little milder air in for a day or two of temperatures near a bit above freezing, but there's going to be another shot of colder air coming in around the 4th or 5th of April that could cause temperatures to average below normal, especially centered on southern areas of the mainland and into the northern panhandle. And we expect also precipitation maybe to be a little drier along the Gulf Coast, which is not unusual for this time of year. And then any weather systems that come in off the Bering could produce a little above normal precipitation in areas of east central near the Alcan border or back up here toward the central north slope and west side of the Brooks Range. But overall, don't look for any persistent warmer temperatures that could lead to an early breakup. At this point, it's going to stay cooler than normal here through early April.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Here is your aviation weather if you have a flight planned either this Monday or Tuesday. So the strong frontal system that came in along the west coast over the weekend is pushing inland and weakening, but along it we still have lower ceilings, some milder air aloft, areas of snow that could be mixed with a little bit of freezing rain or freezing drizzle, especially up through the central interior. So we expect rather widespread IFR conditions across areas of the interior and extending off of the southwest coast into the eastern Aleutians. Monday afternoon, along and just behind that front, we expect there to be some rather extensive, again, IFR conditions from the east side of the Brooks Range all the way down along, especially west side of the Alaska Range into Bristol Bay. And as we go into Tuesday morning, those areas will continue to spread eastward as that moisture does so a little further east along the Alaska Range, both north and south of it. And then by Tuesday afternoon, I think conditions will be improving overall to VFR or MVFR across much of the mainland. There could still be a few pockets here or there, but more importantly, the next weather system. Ahead of that, we expect a broad area of IFR conditions from the Bering Strait through St. Lawrence all the way down into the central Aleutians as another low will be emerging out here into the western Bering Sea here for midweek as it works its way eastward to around St. Matthew Island. But in the meantime, early in the week, Monday, Anaktuvuk Pass, generally IFR conditions, especially the south entrance, north entrance, more in the way of MVFR. Adigan Pass, same thing, IFR conditions, especially the south entrance down into the Yukon River Valley, MVFR as you go north. Lake Clark and Merrill, kind of a mix of MVFR, IFR, but generally IFR should prevail as we have the remnant moisture associated with that front just off to the north and west. Same thing, Rainy Pass, generally IFR conditions expected on Monday, as will be the case at Windy Pass. A little further east, though, Isabel Pass could see VFR conditions there for a time in the afternoon. More so as you go toward the Alcan border, Mentasta Pass, VFR is expected there on Monday. And in the Copper River Basin, Tanita Pass, also VFR conditions. Portage Pass may start out VFR, but becoming MVFR by afternoon and more likely IFR as we go into Monday night and Tuesday morning. Chilkoot and White will hold on to VFR conditions on Monday as well. And looking at the freezing levels, they have come up a bit here in through the central interior as that frontal boundary pushes eastward and weakens, but it has the moisture in the forms of areas of snow that could be mixed with some a little bit of sleet, freezing rain, or freezing drizzle. And we can see the freezing levels aloft have come upwards of 2,000, 4,000, 6,000 feet down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, though the southern end of the front has really washed out. This is just kind of the moisture feed and the flow aloft helping to pull in milder air a little further north and eastward. And the greatest threat of icing on Monday will be across areas of the northeast interior, especially south side of the Brooks Range, all along the Yukon River, north of the Alaska Range, and west of the Alaska Range into the southwest interior through Bristol Bay, and even down into the far eastern Aleutians. We expect potential for icing generally above 3,000 or 4,000 feet here through the Brooks Range, especially along north of the Yukon River, near the Alaska Range above 6,000 feet, and then also above 6,000 feet on the warmer side of the system there in Bristol Bay. Looking at things aloft, we have a trough at 300 millibars or 30,000 feet with a ridge off to the east nudging up into northwest Canada, 135 knot southwest-west jet max over the mainland, and a broad belt of winds at 700 millibars over the mainland in excess of 50 to 65 knots, and bringing it down to 3,000 feet, not quite that strong, but we still see the high pressure ridge here from just south of the Gulf up into northwest Canada, and then a broad belt of winds 30, 40 knots behind me. Here comes the next system, the next low that'll be tracking eastward from the western Bering to around St. Matthew by as we go into Wednesday morning. So the greatest threat for turbulence during the day on Monday is going to cover a good portion of the mainland, especially west and north of the Alaska Range, across the Brooks Range, up even along the northwest coast. Surface to 4,000 feet, especially up through the Yukon Valley. And in the vicinity of the Alaska Range, we could see some turbulence surface to 8,000 feet and then surface to 4,000 feet. Eastern Aleutians and the far western Aleutians, a little pocket there, surface to 3,000 feet.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from GINA and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by AKwx to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and GINA's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that they could that would be easier to travel with. You know. Possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state.
Which you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy, and it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the the lay of the land there,
Yeah.
feeds that information in the computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a three-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these two-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math in many different locations around Alaska. Then this would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska. Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts, but before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back, and it's time now to look at the marine weather segment of our show. Start off with the sea ice edge. With the strong winds associated with the most recent storm, we have had some polinias open up along areas of the northwest and north side of especially the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref down toward Wales, also along the Russian coast. And then as we drop down into areas of Norton Sound and the ice edge that runs now from just southwest of St. Matthew down here off of the Kuskokwim and Bristol Bay areas, the ice is going to maybe retreat just a little bit more and then kind of halt. The next weather system we'll be keeping an eye on is a low that will be crossing the western Bering on Tuesday and then passing somewhere near or just north of St. Matthew on toward the lower Yukon Delta coast by the time we get into Wednesday morning or so. In the meantime, out along the southeast panhandle inner channels, winds will generally be out of the northwest, 15 to 20 knots, but could be as high as 25 knots with gusts to 35 knots out through the middle channels, and then areas toward the west along the outer Gulf Coast within 15 nautical miles of shore. Winds generally out of the northeast to north, 15 to 20 knots from Gustavus southward, 10 to 15 knots up toward Yakutat. Waves generally 4 to 5 feet. On Tuesday, winds will be more from the north-northwest across the inner channels at about 15 knots with waves 2 to 3 feet. The outer course northwest winds 25 knots or so, especially as you get east and southeast there of Yakutat. Waves running as high as 8 to 10 feet in this area, and then 5 to 6 feet from Yakutat westward. And looking at the northwestern Gulf, variable winds around 10 knots, Prince William Sound off the Kenai with waves 2-3 feet. But winds do turn southeast to south through the lower half of Cook Inlet, picking up 15 to 20 knots with waves 3 to as high as 5 feet. And on Tuesday, winds will turn a little more northerly here across Prince William Sound at 10 knots, a couple of foot waves. North-northwest winds 10 to as high as 20 knots coming out of the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves there 3 to 5 feet. And across Kodiak Island on Monday, we expect winds to be generally south-southwest, 20 to 25 knots. And as we run out the length of the Alaska Peninsula, generally south winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 4 to 5 feet in the nearshore waters within 15 nautical miles. Here on the North Pacific side and 3 to 6 feet on the Bering side. And for Tuesday, winds across and near Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, and to the south and east of there, 15 knots, waves 3-4 feet. But winds turn east to southeast, picking up again 15 to about 20 knots, so not especially strong. Waves 5 to 6 feet on the North Pacific side and 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side. The Aleutian chain winds will generally be out of the north around 20-25 knots, especially the eastern Aleutians on Monday. Variable west of Adak, and then they pick up and turn around to the south, 35 to 40 knots, southerly gales west of Kiskma to Shimia. That's in advance of that next system that'll be coming in across the western Aleutians and pushing up through the western portion of the Bering Sea. And we see the effects of that coming up here Tuesday. Winds across the eastern Aleutians out of the southeast to south, 20 knots, but they pick up to 35 to 40 knots southwest to westerly gales from Adak westward. And this core of winds is heading northeastward, generally passing north of the central and eastern Aleutians. For Monday, we have the ice in place, winds south-southwest here from Norton Sound to off the Yukon Delta, as high as 25 knots from the west there in St. Matthew with waves in open water 13 feet. On Tuesday, winds are going to try to turn more southeast to south along the immediate southwest coast up through Norton Sound at 15 knots or so, but starting to pick up 35-knot gales from the southeast in advance of a frontal system there at St. Matthew with waves of 16 feet. Across the Arctic, we expect winds to be southwest to west, 20 to 25 knots. And as we drop down along the northwest coast, as high as 30 knots from the southwest and generally 20 to 25 knots from the southwest. Lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait. And on Tuesday, winds will be out of the west to 30 knots, especially the central eastern portion of the Arctic coast, and 25 to 30 knots through the Chukchi Sea with more of a southerly component, but ice remains in place, and 20 to 25 knots on the north side of St. Lawrence. So frontal system that's moved inland from the west coast storm will continue to weaken tonight into Tuesday, and we can expect the next system arriving there in the west on Wednesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.